And I also want to warn people in advance, okay, this is a book that's a prison book, so there's going to be prison language. So I saw a very young child walk in. No, it's not that. He's probably heard words like fucking shit, so there's going to be some of that. Just warning you in advance. This is from a chapter I call Fighting Dragons. Oh, just a little word about this. Every year, we went across the street to Homestead CI. That was the women's prison. Dade CI was the men's prison. We went across the street for the annual training. So this concerns that. I get a sick feeling no matter how many times I see that video. I disclose reflectively as I sat down after a long day at the annual DOC training across the street at the women's prison. You ain't kidding. That dude was seriously suffering. Carmen paused as she sat down too and went online. Here he is, Timothy Joe Suiters, shoplifting, mentally ill inmate, stabbed himself 7 times in the stomach. Jesus, this guy was fucked up. Bipolar, psychotic, attempted suicide 3 times. Sounds exactly like some of the guys we have in here. When Sergeant Holmes was showing the video, he was saying how the guards at that Michigan prison didn't even follow their own protocols. Said Suiters should have never been put in that suicide watch cell for disciplinary reasons, I stated. For sure, there had been 4-point restraints on that steel bed without a mattress for something like 4 days. Naked and soaked in his own urine. Not to mention the heat index was about 106 degrees. Says here he broke a sprinkler earlier and flooded his cell. Shit, that happens all the time around here. At least we don't go killing people over it. Oh, here's something else I found. 60 Minutes did a piece on him a while back. Fucking A. Now that you mention it, I vaguely remember seeing that. I think they were trying to draw attention to mentally ill inmates. But that was before I came to prison, so I really wasn't tuned in. Strange that I'm here now working with the same kind of people, I considered gravely. Get this. The Michigan DOC said they were following procedures, but 60 Minutes found they kept him in restraints 15 hours longer than they were supposed to. 17 straight hours on one occasion, 12 and 16 2 other times. I think guards in TCU can't keep inmates restrained for more than a couple hours, maybe less, she revealed. I find that amazing. Same old worn out story. We were following procedures, but the inmate died. What kind of fucking procedure is that? I exclaimed contemptuously. The DOC up there must think there's some really dumb fucks in Michigan if they're gonna swallow that pack of lies. This is interesting. Michigan paid out $3.25 million to his family in a wrongful death settlement. Once again, taxpayers foot the bill for the guard's fuck-up, she concluded strongly as she looked up from her monitor. When I was watching that video today, I couldn't help thinking about the nurses who, one after the other, kept checking him and then leaving without so much as a peep. Like, they can't say, get this guy out of here, he's not doing well, I pointed out. I thought of that too. Even when it becomes a medical issue, guess nobody wants to go up against security, she surmised. Just like here, poor Samantha found that out. She didn't stand a chance when they turned their sights on her. I bet security blamed somebody else for Suiters' death, I theorized. I'm guessing they threw those nurses under the bus. I'd be surprised if the Michigan DOC admitted any culpability in his death. What I don't get is that Suiters was totally calmed down and they still left him in isolation. What the fuck? Even the original flawed reason for putting him in there in the first place wasn't a factor anymore. That's got to be totally on those guards at that point, Carmen concluded. Your reasoning is sound. What troubles me is how everybody just sat by and watched suitors slipping away. It's barbaric. This is a case where a short sentence turns into a death sentence, I summed up. I would go so far as to say it's legalized murder, or at least manslaughter. I bet their attitude was like, let's teach this guy a lesson. I'd go along with that. Fuck, you're not going to believe this. Here's what his mother said, and I quote, "It was January in the wintertime, and you know, he was running around outside with his clothes off, thinking he was a knight, fighting dragons. You know, you lose touch with reality." She goes on to say his troubles didn't start until his late teens when he started acting strangely, Carmen reported, looking at me over her monitor. How many times have we talked about that? Mental patients who should be in a psych facility, not prison. Too many times to count. Late teens, his mother said. That's somewhat typical for the onset of schizophrenia. His constellation of symptoms would probably support that diagnosis. Thing is, when I hear about something like that, I think back to my school counseling experience and wonder how he fell through the cracks. I'm sure there are a ton of reasons, but one thing's for certain, the system ain't working. In his case, it seems like there were plenty of times to intervene in his timeline, but for whatever reason, nothing or very little was done, she added gloomily. There are so many people barely existing who are so mentally fucked up, they can't hold down a job or even have a place to live. So what do we do about them? We put them in prison when they get caught stealing food or something. Remember Haynes, that little black guy who claims he's an astronaut and neurosurgeon? I inquired. Oh, sure. He was on my caseload for a couple of years before you got here. He says some crazy shit. Totally delusional, she answered. He was talking about his case the other day and said prosecutors offered him 5 years for shoplifting or something. Haynes told me it was a case of mistaken identity, so he turned him down and went to trial. Of course, we know what happened. Do you know when his EOS date is? I asked with raised eyebrows. I think he gets out a long, long time from now, if I remember correctly. I checked his chart to verify what he said, and he gets out in 2089. What the fuck? He would have been out already if he accepted the deal. He's 47 years old, for Christ's sakes. They gave him a life sentence for all intents and purposes. But that's besides the point. He's mentally ill and never should have been in here in the first place. He'll be warehoused in TCU until he dies, I concluded. You're right. Even with game time, he'll die of old age. One thing's for sure. He can't ever be put back out on the compound. He'd be eaten alive. Sweet little guy like that, he'd be somebody's fuckboy in 2 minutes, she grimaced. He never comes out of his cell, not even for rec. When I drop by for our session, his cell is completely empty except for his bedding and a few clothes. No books, no puzzles, no pictures, nothing. He's one of the most pitiful guys we have in here. Just sitting in his cell all day alone with his thoughts, I disclosed disconsolately. I know what you mean. I always secretly hope he passed his time immersed in some rich delusional fantasy. His internal life could be quite amazing for all we know, Carmen added optimistically. I hope so. That's a better way to look at it, I suggested sympathetically. You know, it could be true. In his delusion, he's performing brain surgery on some hot alien babe as they're traveling the speed of light to the Andromeda galaxy. There you go. And she probably has 4 tits, she joked. 4 more and she'd be a centerfold in Playboy universe, I continued. Speaking of hot babes, did you see how they were looking at you when you walked through the yard to the training? Hot babes? I asked, puzzled. You better go and get your eyes checked, woman. Maybe there were 2, if that many, and one looked like she was a lesbian. No matter, they looked at you like a hungry tigress with a plate of raw meat in front of her, she chuckled happily. Homestead hotties had you in their sights, you big hunk of man flesh. All their heads were turning at the same time, but they weren't looking in my direction, Carmen admitted, grinning broadly. Damn, I miss that. It'd be a boost to my ego, except it'd be like Quasimodo checking you out. I laughed. I haven't had any in so long, Quasimodo'd be looking real good about now, she growled lasciviously. Come here, baby. Let me rub your hump. Now you've gone too far, I chided as I laughed. You know how visual I am. My sex laugh is shot until I let that one go. At least you have one. I pulled that example out to really illustrate the plight of the mentally ill.